Every single time you fill up your tank in California, you are paying a hidden fee that nobody can fully explain. Not the oil companies, not the state government, not even the economists who have spent years trying to track it down. This fee does not appear on any receipt. It is not listed on any sign at the pump. It is not a tax that Sacramento voted on or a regulation that went through public comment. It simply exists, buried in the price of every gallon, siphoning money from your wallet into a financial black hole that has consumed $59 billion from California drivers over the past decade. $59 billion. That is not a typo. That is not an exaggeration. That is the calculated cost of what economists have come to call the mystery surcharge, a price premium that appeared out of nowhere in 2015 and has refused to go away ever since. If you drive in California, you have been paying this fee for nearly 10 years without knowing it. And the most disturbing part is that after all this time, after countless investigations and hearings and accusations, nobody can definitively tell you where that money went or why you are still paying it today. This is the story of the biggest hidden fee in American gasoline history, how it started, why it persists, and what it reveals about the true cost of filling up in the Golden State. Let me take you back to February 18th, 2015. That was the day everything changed at California gas pumps, even though most drivers would not realize it for months. On that Wednesday morning, an explosion ripped through the ExxonMobil refinery in Torrance, a sprawling industrial complex in the South Bay that processed roughly 150,000 barrels of crude oil every single day. The blast injured 4 workers and sent a massive cloud of smoke billowing over Los Angeles. More importantly for California drivers, it knocked offline a facility responsible for producing roughly 10% of the state's entire gasoline supply. The market response was immediate and predictable. When you suddenly lose 10% of supply in any market, prices spike. Within days, California gas prices shot up by more than 50 cents per gallon. Drivers grumbled. Politicians made statements. News crews filmed long lines at Costco gas stations. Everyone assumed it was temporary. Everyone assumed that once the Torrance refinery came back online, prices would return to normal. That assumption turned out to be catastrophically wrong. The Torrance refinery did come back online. Repairs took months, but by late 2015, the facility was processing crude oil again. Other refineries that had experienced maintenance issues during the same period also returned to full capacity. Supply normalized, inventories recovered. Every economic indicator suggested that prices should have fallen back to their pre-explosion baseline. They did not. Something strange was happening in California's gasoline market, something that defied the basic laws of supply and demand. Prices remained elevated even after every logical reason for that elevation had disappeared. At first, analysts assumed it was just market friction, a temporary lag while the system rebalanced. Weeks passed, then months, then years. The premium never went away. It simply became the new normal, baked into every gallon sold at every station across the state. Most drivers never noticed because they had nothing to compare it to. They just knew that California gas was expensive, which it always had been. What they did not know was that it had become significantly more expensive than it should have been, even accounting for all the factors that traditionally made California fuel cost more than the national average. Severin Borenstein noticed. Borenstein is a professor at UC Berkeley's Haas School of Business and the faculty director of the Energy Institute. He has spent decades studying energy markets, and he has particular expertise in California's gasoline sector. When prices failed to normalize after the Torrance explosion, he started digging into the data. What he found disturbed him deeply. Borenstein's analysis was methodical and rigorous. He started with all the known factors that make California gas more expensive than fuel in other states. First, there are the taxes. California's state excise tax on gasoline is among the highest in the nation, currently around 60 cents per gallon. Add the federal tax of 18 cents. Then there is the sales tax that applies on top of everything else. Taxes alone add well over $1 to every gallon sold in California. But taxes are transparent. They are listed on receipts. They are voted on by legislators. They are not hidden. Borenstein accounted for all of them. Next, he factored in California's unique fuel formulation requirements. The state mandates a special blend of gasoline designed to reduce air pollution and meet strict environmental standards. This California reformulated gasoline, known as carbob, costs more to produce than conventional fuel. It also cannot be easily imported from refineries in other states, which limits supply options when local refineries have problems. This reformulation premium is real and adds somewhere between 10 and 20 cents per gallon depending on market conditions. Borenstein accounted for that too. Then, there are the environmental programs. California's cap and trade system puts a price on carbon emissions, and that cost gets passed through to fuel. The low carbon fuel standard adds another layer of compliance costs. The underground storage tank fee funds environmental cleanup. These programs add somewhere between 30 and 50 cents per gallon, varying based on credit prices and regulatory requirements. Bornstein calculated all of these costs carefully. He also accounted for transportation and distribution costs, which are higher in California due to geography and infrastructure constraints. He factored in the retail margins that gas station owners need to stay in business. He considered seasonal variations in demand and the summer driving season price patterns that affect every state. He analyzed crude oil costs and refining margins and every other variable that energy economists use to explain gasoline prices. When he added everything up, the numbers did not match. California gas prices were consistently higher than all of these known factors could explain. Not by a few cents, by 30 to 50 cents per gallon, every day, for years on end. Bornstein called this unexplained premium the mystery surcharge. The name stuck because it captured something essential about the phenomenon. This was not a tax anyone had voted for. This was not a regulation anyone could point to. This was not a cost that appeared on any refinery's balance sheet or any government agency's fee schedule. It was simply money that disappeared from drivers' wallets into the gasoline supply chain with no clear explanation of where it went or why it existed. He published his findings. He testified before state legislators. He gave interviews to journalists. He presented his data at academic conferences. The mystery surcharge became one of the most discussed anomalies in American energy markets. And still, nobody could definitively explain it. Let me put the scale of this hidden fee into perspective. Bornstein and his colleagues calculated that between 2015 and 2024, the mystery surcharge extracted approximately $59 billion from California drivers. $59 billion that cannot be attributed to taxes, regulations, fuel formulations, transportation costs, or any other identifiable factor. To understand how staggering this number is, consider that California has roughly 14 million households. That $59 billion works out to more than $4,000 per household over the past decade. $4,000 that every California family paid without knowing it, without voting for it, without any explanation of where it went. If someone had proposed a $4,000 per household gas fee in Sacramento, there would have been riots in the streets. But because it was hidden in the pump price, invisible and unexplained, it simply happened, year after year, billion after billion. The question everyone wants answered is simple. Where did the money go? The leading theory focuses on market concentration. California's gasoline market is dominated by a small number of very large players. 5 companies control approximately 96% of the state's refining capacity. When a market is this concentrated, strange things can happen to pricing. In a competitive market with many producers, any company that tried to charge prices significantly above their costs would lose customers to competitors offering better deals. Competition keeps prices close to the actual cost of production plus a reasonable profit margin. But when only a handful of companies control almost all supply, the dynamics change. There is less pressure to compete on price. There is more ability to maintain elevated margins without losing market share. There is what economists call market power, the ability to influence prices in ways that would be impossible in a truly competitive environment. After the Torrance explosion disrupted the market in 2015, refiners may have discovered that they could maintain higher margins without losing significant sales volume. California drivers need gas to get to work. They cannot easily substitute other products. They cannot import fuel from Texas or Louisiana because California's unique fuel requirements make that impractical. They are, in economic terms, a captive market. Once prices rose during the supply disruption, refiners may have simply chosen not to lower them again, not through any explicit conspiracy or illegal coordination, but through the natural dynamics of an oligopolistic market where each major player watches what the others do and matches their pricing behavior. If no one breaks ranks to lower prices, prices stay high. And in California's concentrated market, no one broke ranks. The oil industry disputes this interpretation vigorously. Industry representatives argue that the mystery surcharge is a myth, a statistical artifact created by flawed methodology. They point to California's genuinely higher operating costs, its complex regulatory environment, and its infrastructure constraints. They note that refining margins fluctuate with market conditions, and that what looks like excess profits in one period may be offset by losses in another. They accuse academics like Bornstein of having an anti-industry bias and cherry-picking data to support predetermined conclusions. The Western States Petroleum Association has published its own analyses challenging the mystery surcharge concept. These analyses emphasize factors like increased maintenance costs at aging facilities, higher labor costs in California, and the expenses associated with complying with ever-tightening environmental regulations. Industry spokespeople argue that if the mystery surcharge were real, it would show up clearly in refinery profit margins, which they claim are not unusually high compared to other regions. The truth is probably somewhere in the complex middle ground between these competing narratives. California's refining industry does face genuinely higher costs than refineries in Texas or Louisiana. Operating in California is expensive, and those costs are real. But the persistence of the price premium through vastly different market conditions, through periods of high crude oil prices and low crude oil prices, through supply disruptions and supply abundance, suggests that something beyond normal costs is at work. The market concentration explanation does not require any illegal behavior or explicit conspiracy. It just requires a small number of large companies operating in a market where consumers have few alternatives, each company rationally maximizing its own profits in an environment where aggressive price competition offers little advantage. The result is prices that settle well above what a competitive market would produce, with the excess extracted from drivers who have no choice but to pay. Sacramento has tried to address the mystery surcharge with limited success. In 2023, Governor Newsom pushed through SBX 102, legislation that created a new division of petroleum market oversight with sweeping powers to monitor the gasoline market. The agency can investigate pricing anomalies, demand data from oil companies, and impose penalties of up to $1 million per day for violations. The law was explicitly designed to address the kind of unexplained price premiums that Borenstein and others had documented. Newsom stood at press conferences declaring that California would no longer let oil companies rip off drivers. The rhetoric was tough. The political optics were good. The actual impact remains uncertain. Critics from the oil industry called the new oversight agency government overreach that would drive up costs and push more refineries out of state. Critics from consumer advocacy groups worried that the agency lacked real enforcement teeth and would end up as another bureaucratic layer that produced reports but changed nothing. Some energy economists expressed skepticism that any state-level agency could fundamentally alter pricing dynamics in a market controlled by a handful of massive corporations with armies of lawyers and decades of experience managing regulatory relationships. The mystery surcharge persisted through 2023 and 2024, even after the new oversight agency was established. Whether it will eventually make a difference remains to be seen. The mystery surcharge is not the only hidden cost California drivers face. It sits on top of the most complex and expensive fuel tax and fee structure in the nation. Let me walk you through exactly what you are paying for every time you fill up, the costs you know about and the costs you probably do not. Start with the federal excise tax of 18.4 cents per gallon. This applies everywhere in America and funds highway construction and maintenance. Nothing unique to California here. Then add California's state excise tax, which is currently around 60 cents per gallon and adjusts annually for inflation. California's excise tax is the highest of any state in the nation. These two taxes alone put California drivers at a significant disadvantage compared to motorists in other states. But we are just getting started. California also charges sales tax on gasoline, and because sales tax is calculated as a percentage of the total price, including other taxes, it creates a tax-on-tax effect that compounds the cost. Depending on your county, this adds somewhere between 8 and 11% on top of everything else. Then there is the cap and trade program. California requires fuel distributors to purchase carbon allowances for the emissions associated with the gasoline they sell. The cost of these allowances varies based on auction prices and market conditions, but it currently adds somewhere between 23 and 28 cents per gallon. This program is designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by making carbon-intensive fuels more expensive, and it is working exactly as designed. The cost is real and intentional, even if most drivers do not realize they are paying it. The low-carbon fuel standard adds another layer. This program requires fuel producers to reduce the carbon intensity of their products over time, either by blending in lower carbon alternatives or by purchasing credits from producers of cleaner fuels. The cost varies depending on credit prices and compliance pathways, but it typically adds somewhere between 9 and 31 cents per gallon. Again, this is intentional policy designed to accelerate the transition away from petroleum, and the cost is built into every gallon you buy. Do not forget the underground storage tank fee, a seemingly small charge of 2 cents per gallon that funds the cleanup of contaminated sites from leaking fuel storage tanks. 2 cents sounds trivial, but multiply it by the billions of gallons California consumes each year, and it adds up to serious money. Now add the mystery surcharge on top of all these known costs, 30 to 50 cents per gallon that cannot be explained by any tax, any regulation, any compliance cost, any infrastructure constraint. Just money that evaporates from your wallet into the ether of California's concentrated refining market. When you add everything together, a California driver filling up a 15-gallon tank is paying somewhere between $18 and $22 in taxes, fees, and unexplained premiums. Just in extras, before the actual cost of the gasoline itself. A driver in Texas filling the same tank might pay $5 or $6 in taxes and fees total. The difference is not small. It compounds with every fill-up, every week, every month, every year. Over a decade, a California driver who fills up once a week has paid thousands of dollars more than an identical driver in a lower-cost state. Much of that difference is visible and intentional, the result of policy choices California has made about environmental protection and infrastructure funding. But a huge chunk of it, that $59 billion mystery surcharge, is invisible and unexplained. The human impact of these costs falls hardest on those least able to afford it. California's progressive political culture has produced environmental policies that impose costs through fuel prices rather than through income taxes or property taxes. This approach is regressive by design. A minimum wage worker commuting 40 miles to her job pays the same per gallon premium as a tech executive driving a Mercedes to his Palo Alto office. But that premium represents a much larger share of the minimum wage worker's income. She cannot choose to telecommute. She cannot afford to live closer to her job in California's insane housing market. She cannot buy an electric vehicle to escape gas prices entirely. She is trapped paying the mystery surcharge and every other California fuel premium with money she desperately needs for rent and food and childcare. This regressivity is baked into California's entire approach to energy and environmental policy. The state has made a political choice to address climate change and air quality through mechanisms that increase fuel costs. There are good arguments for this approach, and California's air is dramatically cleaner than it was a generation ago. But the costs do not fall equally. They fall on people who drive older vehicles because they cannot afford new ones. They fall on people who live in the Central Valley or the Inland Empire because coastal housing is impossibly expensive. They fall on people who work jobs that require driving, who cannot simply take transit or work from home. The mystery surcharge makes this regressivity even worse because it is not the result of any policy choice. Nobody voted to transfer $59 billion from California drivers to the refining industry. It just happened, invisibly, while politicians focused on the taxes and regulations they could see and control. What can California actually do about the mystery surcharge? The options are limited, and none of them are easy. Some advocates call for breaking up the concentrated refining industry, forcing divestitures that would create more competitors and theoretically more price competition. This approach faces enormous legal and practical obstacles. Oil companies would fight any breakup attempt for years in court. Even if the state prevailed, it is not clear that more competitors would actually produce lower prices, given California's unique fuel requirements and infrastructure constraints. A market with 10 refiners might behave similarly to a market with 5 if all of them face the same high cost and captive demand. Other advocates suggest allowing California to import more fuel from out of state by relaxing the unique fuel formulation requirements that limit supply options. This would theoretically increase competition by letting Gulf Coast and other refineries compete for California sales, but relaxing environmental standards would likely increase air pollution in a state that still has some of the worst air quality in the nation. California spent decades implementing these standards specifically because they produce real health benefits. Abandoning them to lower gas prices by a few cents would trade one problem for another. Some have proposed state-owned or state-partnered refining capacity, essentially having the government enter the gasoline production business to provide competitive pressure on private refiners. This idea runs into obvious objections about government efficiency and the wisdom of having politicians manage complex industrial operations. It also runs against the long-term direction of California policy, which is trying to reduce petroleum consumption, not entrench it through public investment. The most realistic path forward may simply be transparency. If drivers understood exactly how much of what they pay at the pump goes to taxes, how much to regulatory compliance, and how much to unexplained market premiums, they might demand better explanations from both government and industry. The mystery surcharge persists, Partly because it is invisible. Making it visible, putting a number on it at every transaction, might create the political pressure needed to actually address it. But even transparency has limits. California drivers need gasoline to live their lives. They will pay what they have to pay because the alternative is not driving. And for most Californians, not driving is not an option. The mystery surcharge is ultimately a story about power. The power of concentrated industries to extract value from captive consumers. The power of complexity to hide costs that would be unacceptable if they were visible. The power of necessity to force people to pay prices they would never accept if they had alternatives. $59 billion did not disappear into a vacuum. It went somewhere. It enriched someone. It came out of the budgets of millions of California families who never knew they were paying it and could not have avoided it even if they did. This is not a story with a satisfying conclusion. The mystery surcharge has not been solved. It has not been explained. It has not been eliminated. It continues to extract money from California drivers every single day, adding up to billions more with each passing year. If you drive in California, you are paying it right now. You paid it the last time you filled up. You will pay it the next time. You have no choice. The only question is whether knowing about it changes anything, whether awareness creates pressure for reform, whether $59 billion in unexplained costs can ever be recovered or even stopped from growing further. The answers to those questions depend on what California drivers demand from their government and their gasoline suppliers. So far, they have not demanded much. The mystery surcharge proves that you can take billions from people, year after year, as long as you do it invisibly. As long as the cost is hidden in a price that was already high, as long as nobody has to explain where the money went. Now you know, $59 billion, nearly a decade, no explanation, no accountability, no end in sight. Every gallon you buy in California includes this hidden fee, this mystery surcharge that nobody voted for and nobody can fully explain. What happens next depends on whether enough people decide that $59 billion deserves an answer. I want to hear what you think in the comments below. Did you know about this hidden fee before today? Does it change how you think about California gas prices? And what do you think it would take to finally get an explanation for where $59 billion actually went? Subscribe if you want to understand what is really happening at California gas pumps. The information is out there. Most people just do not know to look for it. Now you do.